My family left me at a gas station 15 years later. I handed them a bill for $73.50. They abandoned me in the middle of nowhere like trash. No goodbye, no explanation. Now they want forgiveness, medical help, and $220,000. So I handed them the cost of a Greyhound ticket they never took. They left me behind. And I built a life they could never touch. The summer I turned 22, I didn't expect my life to fall apart at a roadside gas station in Colorado. I mean, I wasn't exactly living the dream already, just crashing at home and putting in long hours at my dad's hardware store to scrape together some cash. College wasn't really an option, according to him. No point wasting money on nonsense, he'd say anytime I brought it up. He made it real clear I wasn't going anywhere. My dad, Hank, wasn't the kind of man who raised his voice. He didn't have to. He'd give you this look like you were already a disappointment and you'd shrink 2 sizes inside yourself. That's who I grew up with. And my younger brother, Brandon? He soaked it all in like a sponge. Golden child. Star of the show. He figured out real early that he could either be Hank's punching arm or the punching bag. Take a wild guess which one he picked. And then there was my mom, Linda. Quiet, tired, always with this faraway look like she was waiting for her life to start again. She never stood up to Dad. Sometimes she'd say, "That's enough," in this soft, shaky voice, but it didn't mean anything. No one listened. We weren't poor exactly, but there weren't any beach vacations or big family holidays. So when Hank suddenly announced we were going on a road trip to my uncle's wedding in Colorado, it felt off. Like something was brewing under the surface and I couldn't quite smell it yet. 3 days into that god-awful trip, I already regretted not faking the flu. The car was packed tight. I'd been sleeping half-curled in the back seat, and the only breaks I got from being the family punching bag were when Hank and Brandon took turns cracking jokes at my expense. Classic routine. I was the joke. Always had been. That morning we pulled off at this rest stop somewhere in Colorado. Middle of nowhere. Just dusty fields, some distant mountains, and a sad little bathroom shack next to a couple vending machines. Brandon and Hank were up front, laughing about something, probably at me, and my mom was touching up her lipstick in the visor mirror like we weren't all suffocating in silence. I got out of the car to stretch and hit the restroom. I left my phone behind. It was charging on the dash and didn't bother with my wallet. We were on a family trip, for God's sake. I didn't think I'd need anything just to take a leak. 10 minutes tops. I washed my hands, stepped back into the sunlight, and blinked like I'd stepped into a different reality. The parking lot was empty. Gone. The dark green Suburban we'd been crammed into? Just not there. At first, I stood there like an idiot, assuming they were pulling one of their stupid jokes. Maybe parked around the back. Maybe hiding, laughing, waiting for me to panic. I wandered the entire rest area. Back, front, vending machines, even behind the dumpsters. Nothing. It's hard to explain what that kind of betrayal feels like. When it comes from your own flesh and blood, it lands different. It carves into you deeper. I sat on the curb, still holding on to the hope that they'd swing back around. Any minute now. Any minute. An hour passed. People came and went. One trucker asked if I was all right, and I lied, told him I was just waiting on my girlfriend. He nodded and left. At some point, I stopped checking the road. That cold, hollow feeling in my stomach started spreading through my chest. They weren't coming back. My first instinct was to ask someone to borrow their phone. I was seconds from approaching a mom with 2 kids when it hit me. This flood of memories, every birthday they forgot, every time I got blamed for something I didn't do, every joke at my expense that left me staring at the floor, swallowing anger like glass. I could hear their voices in my head. Brandon's smug laugh. Bet he's crying right now. Dad's dismissive grunt. If he's not a complete idiot, he'll figure it out. And my mom's voice, faint, useless. Maybe we shouldn't. I turned away from that mom and her kids. Eventually, I did borrow a phone, but not to call them. I asked for the number to the nearest homeless shelter in Grand Junction, about 40 miles out. I told the woman who let me use her phone that my family had an emergency and had to leave, but they'd send someone for me later. She hesitated, but I guess I didn't look too dangerous. She agreed to give me a ride into town. That night, I sat on a cot at the shelter with nothing but the clothes on my back, an old Metallica shirt, ripped jeans, and busted Vans. I had no ID, no cash, no way to prove who I even was. That's when it became real. Not just what they'd done, but what I had to do next. I had 2 choices: chase down the people who left me in the middle of nowhere, or build something new from scratch. I chose me. I'll be honest, walking into that shelter was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It wasn't even shame exactly. It was more like the crushing weight of realizing I had nothing and no one. Not even a damn toothbrush. The place wasn't terrible considering. It was clean, quiet, and the guy running the front desk, Dave, treated me like a human being, which felt foreign after 22 years of being invisible. He didn't ask too many questions. Just handed me a blanket, showed me to a cot, and let me know the rules. Curfew was strict, no drugs, no drama. Fair enough. That first night, I just laid there staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. Not just the rest stop. My whole life. Every time my dad, Hank, called me a waste of space. Every time Brandon humiliated me for laughs. And my mom, Linda, just stood there like always pretending she couldn't hear it. I woke up the next morning with zero plan and the same clothes I'd slept in. I asked Dave if I could use the shelter's computer for a bit. He nodded and pointed me to the corner. First, I tried to look up the address for the wedding I was supposed to be at. Thought maybe I could show up, confront them, get some closure, or even a ride home. But then I sat there with the screen glowing in front of me and thought, what's the point? Why go chasing people who left me behind like trash? So I opened a new email account instead. I Googled how to replace a stolen ID. I searched for cash-paying jobs. No references, no questions. Just work. It took me a couple hours, but I made a plan. 2 days later, I walked into a tiny diner on the edge of town called Sunny's. It looked like a place frozen in time. Yellowed menus, booths patched with duct tape, and a waitress who called every customer, Han. The owner, Geraldine, was behind the counter sipping coffee and going over receipts. She was in her 60s, short and sharp-eyed, with gray hair streaked purple and tattoos curling up both arms. She looked like someone who'd seen too much and didn't take crap from anyone. I walked up to her and said, "Hey, I know this sounds crazy, but I really need a job. My wallet was stolen. I've got no ID yet, but I'll work hard. Wash dishes, clean floors, whatever." She stared at me for what felt like forever, then said, "You steal from me, you die in the freezer." Then she shrugged and added, "Our dishwasher quit yesterday. You start now." That was it. No paperwork, no nonsense. I tied on an apron that smelled like old onions and started scrubbing plates. That's the thing about rock bottom, it gives you nowhere to go but up. For a week, I worked double shifts. I crashed at the shelter, ate leftover toast and hash browns, and wore donated clothes that didn't fit right. But I showed up. Every damn day. Dave helped me get a copy of my birth certificate from my home state, which I needed to apply for a new ID. It wasn't easy without a wallet, but he made some calls, filled out forms with me, and never once made me feel like a burden. With my first paycheck, I bought a cheap pay-as-you-go phone at Walmart. It was clunky, slow, but it worked. I finally had a number again. A lifeline. And then, exactly 7 days after they left me, that phone rang. Unknown number. I answered, and just like that, I heard my mom's voice. Shaky, almost desperate. "Tyler? Oh my God, where are you? Are you okay? We've been looking everywhere." I didn't say a word. Just listened. She claimed it was all supposed to be a joke. That they'd only driven down the road for a bit and came back, but couldn't find me. That they waited. That they were so worried. In the background, I heard Hank yelling something like, "Tell him to quit being dramatic and get to Rick's place." And Brandon laughing, but he's crying in a bush somewhere. I stood there, holding the phone, heart beating like a drum. But the fear was gone. What I felt now was clarity. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. "You wanted to see if I could survive without you?" I said, my voice steadier than I'd ever heard it. "Well, now you will." Then I hung up. Blocked the number. Blocked every number I could remember. The next morning, I went to a Verizon store and changed my phone number entirely. I pictured Hank throwing the remote at the wall when he realized I'd cut the cord. I imagined Brandon refreshing his texts, wondering why I wasn't crawling back. I even imagined my mom sitting on the couch, pretending to be sad, while secretly thinking I'd come home when I got hungry enough. But I didn't. I wouldn't. Because for the first time in my life, I had nothing, and somehow that was more freeing than I could have imagined. A month after my family left me in the middle of nowhere, I signed the lease for a tiny studio apartment above a laundromat on 5th Street. The place was nothing fancy, just a single room with a creaky floor, a bathroom the size of a broom closet, and a constant smell of fabric softener wafting in through the vents. But it was mine. I remember standing in the middle of that little box, holding the keys like they were gold. I didn't have a bed yet, just a secondhand mattress on the floor, but that night I slept like I hadn't in years. No one yelling. No slamming doors. No silence that cut deeper than words. Just peace. By then I'd worked my way up at Sunny's. Geraldine had started training me on prep work during the slower shifts. She handed me a cutting board one morning and said, "If you lose a finger, you're buying your own damn band-aids." That's how I learned to dice onions without weeping mostly. I was clumsy at first, but I kept showing up early, staying late, and doing the stuff nobody else wanted, scrubbing the grease trap, restocking during lunch rush, taking the trash out in the snow. Geraldine noticed. She didn't hand out compliments, but she stopped double-checking my work, which in her world was basically high praise. I still had bad days. Days where the ache of being tossed aside crept back in. I'd scroll through Instagram and see people having dinner with their families, smiling like life wasn't a mess, and I'd feel like something essential had been stolen from me. But each morning I'd get up, put on my stained apron and head to Sunny's. That diner became my anchor. And then one Tuesday she walked in. Kendra. I noticed her right away because she looked like she didn't belong there. She wore scrubs and always carried a giant textbook like it was glued to her. She'd sit at the counter, order a Denver omelet, no tomatoes, extra coffee, and disappear into her notes. I mean disappear. Fork frozen midair, eyes locked on the page, oblivious to the world. I started refilling her mug without asking. She'd nod absently or not at all. For months passed before she really looked at me. She glanced at my name tag and said, "Your name's spelled wrong." "It's not," I replied. "Well," she said, totally deadpan, "then I guess we've got a conspiracy on our hands." And just like that it became a thing. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she'd show up, order her usual, and tell me my name tag was still wrong. "Taylor, Tyler, Trevor," really leaning into the mystery, she'd say. I'd play along. It was dumb and kind of adorable. Our first date wasn't even supposed to be a date. Her study group canceled last minute, but she already had a reservation at this little pizza place across town that was impossible to get into. I was bussing tables when her phone buzzed. She stared at it, sighed, and said, "Guess I'm dining solo." Before I knew what I was doing, I said, I don't get off for another 20 minutes, but if you want company." She hesitated, then nodded. "Sure. Why not?" We sat across from each other at Antonio's like two people who were both surprised to be there. It wasn't romantic. Not at first. We talked about school, work, bad movies. She was in med school, juggling rotations and exams, with a focus like I'd never seen. I told her a little about me, just the basics. No family drama. Just I came out here to start over. She didn't press. I didn't deflect. That night, she walked me to my apartment door and said, "Well, your name tag might be wrong, but you're all right." She came back the following Tuesday. And the one after that. 6 months later, she moved in. We outgrew the laundromat studio pretty quickly. Between my early shifts and her late-night studying, we needed space, or at least a door we could close. We found a small 2-bedroom a few blocks over. It wasn't much, but it had a bathroom where the toilet didn't run and a fridge that didn't hum like it was possessed. I kept working my way up at Sunny's. Eventually, Geraldine promoted me to line cook, and I was training new hires, prepping the weekend menu, and finally starting to feel like I belonged somewhere. Kendra and I had our routines. We fought sometimes, sure, but nothing dramatic. I'd come home to her asleep on the couch surrounded by flashcards, or she'd find me in the kitchen at 2 a.m., eating cold enchiladas straight from the pan. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. For the first time in my life, real felt good. Living with Kendra felt like finally exhaling after years of holding my breath. It wasn't perfect. We were broke, exhausted, and had very different ideas about what qualified as doing the dishes, but it was ours. Our nights were spent eating frozen pizza on the couch while quizzing her with flashcards. Our mornings were a chaotic dance of burnt toast, missing socks, and me yelling, "You're gonna be late," while she calmly applied eyeliner in the mirror like we weren't 10 seconds from disaster. And somehow that was enough. She kept grinding through med school while I kept pushing forward at Sunny's. Geraldine, to my surprise, started treating me like more than just another kitchen body. She'd ask my opinion on specials, trust me to close up, and even handed me the keys once when she went to a funeral. Felt like respect. Real earned respect. When Kendra's student loans started creeping up like mold, I began setting aside whatever extra money I could. I couldn't do much. Line cook pay doesn't exactly scream financial hero. But I did what I could. Every extra shift, every weekend I stayed late instead of sleeping in. I told myself this helps her. She never asked for it. That's what made me want to do it more. We had our share of fights, of course. There were nights we barely spoke, her drowning in exams, me stewing over a burned sauce or a slammed prep list. But we always circled back to each other, no matter how tired or cranky or overwhelmed we got. That was new for me. Nobody had ever circled back before. Still, I'd be lying if I said the past just disappeared. There were nights where it crept back in, slow and silent, when I'd see a photo online of some big, smiling family and feel like a stranger watching through the glass. I didn't talk about Hank or Linda or Brandon much. Sometimes Kendra would ask gently, but I'd just shake my head and say, "It's a long story." She never pushed. I checked my old emails sometimes, the one my family used to reach me. The inbox had turned into a weird digital graveyard of guilt and denial. From Mom, "Please come home. We're sorry." From Dad, "This childish phase needs to end. Enough is enough." From Brandon, "Dude, it was just a joke. Stop being such a..." You can imagine the rest. I never answered. Not once. That's the thing about freedom. Once you taste it, real freedom, the kind where you finally stop apologizing for existing, you don't go back. Not for birthdays. Not for holidays. Not for apologies served cold years after the damage is done. And yet, one night something cracked a little. I was scrolling through Facebook, one of those half-bored, half-numb routines, when I saw his face. Brandon. A local news article back home. Headline: "Man charged with DUI after crashing into utility pole." There was his mugshot, bloated, tired, eyes dull. Underneath it, they'd used an old photo from his high school football days. Grinning. Confident. Like he thought the whole world was built just for him. The contrast hit me hard. For a long time I just stared at the screen. I wasn't happy, not exactly. I didn't feel good seeing him fall apart. But I felt something shift. Like a truth I didn't know I needed had just settled into place. They weren't winning. The people who broke me, belittled me, abandoned me, they weren't out there living perfect lives while I scraped by. No, they were unraveling too. Just in different ways. And me? I was still here. Still standing. Still building. By then, Geraldine had started hinting at something bigger. Thinking about opening a second location. She said one night while counting inventory. "You'd run it, of course." I thought she was joking. People like me didn't get offers like that. Not from people who mattered. But Kendra, half asleep next to me in bed, whispered, "You'd be amazing." Even Doug, my stoner neighbor who brewed beer that tasted like regret, said, "Duh, man. You basically run the first one already." That offer lit a fire in me. Not just for work. For life. The life I was building brick by brick. Next to the woman I loved in a home where no one called me worthless. I still had scars. I still had nights where the silence felt too heavy. But I also had something stronger. Peace, purpose, and the beginnings of a real future. The past wasn't gone. But it wasn't in the driver's seat anymore. 5 years. That's how long it had been since I stood on the side of a road in Colorado, blinking into the sun, realizing my family had left me behind like I was nothing. 5 years of silence. I had built a new life. Not perfect but solid. Sunny's had 2 locations now. Kendra had finished med school, passed her boards, and was working 3 days a week at a community clinic so she could spend more time at home with our kids. Ellie and Marcus. I had 2 kids. A wife. A home with a backyard and a swing set that never quite sat level. I wasn't rich. I wasn't famous. But I had peace. I had love. Then one night, sitting on the couch folding laundry with Kendra while some Netflix series played in the background, I got a LinkedIn notification. Someone had viewed my profile 27 times. And one day, curious, I checked. Brandon. My stomach didn't flip. It dropped. It had been so long since I heard that name, seen it attached to me in any way. The past doesn't always knock. It waits. Lurks. Then suddenly shows up on your doorstep wearing your brother's face. I didn't tell Kendra at first. Just tucked it away like an old scar reopening. But I started checking things again. Facebook, community groups back home, the kinds of places I used to stalk out of curiosity. This time, I wasn't just browsing. I was looking for something. And I found it. The hardware store? Gone. Closed down after a Home Depot moved in down the highway. Their house? In foreclosure. My mom? Posting vague updates about health issues. Brandon? Another DUI and back living at home. They weren't looking for me because they missed me. They were looking for me because they needed something. 3 days later, I was at Sunny's East, dealing with a shipment issue. Our supplier had sent the wrong coffee filters again when Maya, our front server, buzzed me from the front desk. "There's a family asking for you," she said. I smiled, already assuming it was Kendra's parents, maybe surprising us on their way through town. It wasn't. It was them. Hank. Thinner, older, his once commanding posture slumped. Linda, her face pale and tight, hair dyed too dark. Brandon, still trying to stand like he mattered, with that same smug posture that didn't quite fit anymore. And someone else, a young woman, maybe early 20s. Nervous. Quiet. I stopped dead. The noise of the diner faded. All I could hear was my own heartbeat slamming behind my ribs. Hank stepped forward. "Tyler," he asked, like we weren't blood. Like he hadn't abandoned me like trash. I nodded. Couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. I had imagined this moment in 1,000 different ways, me yelling, me walking out, me telling them exactly what they deserved. But when the moment came, I just felt tired. I motioned to a booth in the corner. Asked Maya to bring water. Sat down across from the people who used to call themselves my family. They told me how they found me. Some old friend of my mom's had seen a local magazine blurb, 10 rising small business owners in the Rockies, with my picture in front of Sunny's. Forwarded it with the caption, "Isn't this your son?" That's all it took. They'd apparently called my old number over 100 times before it got disconnected. My mom mentioned it like it meant something. Like a tally of voicemails could erase what they did. Then the story started. They talked over each other. My mom cried. My dad insisted I misunderstood what happened. Brandon acted like we were just old friends catching up. The girl, his new wife, apparently, just sat there, watching wide-eyed. And I just listened. I watched Hank glance around the restaurant, sizing it up. Calculating. I watched Linda's hands tremble slightly as she reached for her water. I watched Brandon's charm slip every time he thought I wasn't looking. Finally, when they ran out of breath and noise, I asked one question. Why now? The truth came out in pieces. Hank had heart issues. No insurance. Medical debt piling up. The second house was being foreclosed on. Brandon had poured money into some failed crypto scheme and lost everything. My mom needed surgery. They needed help. They needed me. I didn't get angry. I didn't scream. I felt sympathy. Almost. Not love. Not forgiveness. But I saw them clearly for the first time, not as the monsters I used to fear, but as small, broken people who had once seemed larger than life. And now? They were just tired, desperate people standing in the ruins they made. I told them I'd think about it. Invited them to dinner at my house. Kendra deserved a heads up. That night, I picked up Ellie from dance class, helped Marcus build his show and tell volcano, and texted Kendra every few minutes trying to find the right words. She offered to take the kids to her sister's, but I said no. I wanted them there. I wanted my family to meet my family. Dinner was chicken enchiladas, nothing fancy, just something I'd made 100 times, adapted from the back of a food box. Ellie set the table carefully, forks on the wrong side, of course. Kendra gently corrected her. Marcus insisted on wearing his Spider-Man costume because it was Tuesday, and apparently that's now Spider-Man Day. When the doorbell rang, I nearly dropped the tray. Kendra squeezed my arm and whispered, "I've got you." They shuffled in awkwardly. Hank called her Karen twice before remembering. My mom couldn't stop crying whenever she looked at the kids, totally freaking Marcus out. Brandon and his wife were the most normal, making an effort at conversation, but he kept slipping in weird little hints about family supporting each other. After dinner, Kendra took the kids upstairs for baths, giving me a look that said, "Text me if you need the emergency escape plan." And then it was just us. Hank launched into his pitch. "We're family," he said. "We stick together. I always knew you'd make something of yourself." A lie. He said they needed $220,000. Just a loan, of course. I let him finish. Then I asked him, "Do you remember what you said to me on my 18th birthday?" He looked blank. "You said, at least you won't disappoint me anymore once you're not legally my problem." I turned to my mom. "Do you remember what you did after he ripped up my college acceptance letter?" She said nothing. I turned to Brandon. Remember when you told my first girlfriend I was probably adopted and she left crying? Silence. Then I stood up, walked to my office, and came back with an envelope. Handed it to Hank. Inside was a check for $73.50. He looked at it confused. What the hell is this? In 2010, that's what a Greyhound ticket from Grand Junction back home would have cost, I said. That's how much it would have taken to fix what you did. No one spoke. Then Hank exploded, called me ungrateful, arrogant, selfish. The old hits. I didn't flinch. My mom wept. How could you do this to your family? Brandon just stared, his charm gone cold. His wife looked like she wanted to disappear. I opened the front door. Time to go. Hank crumpled the check and threw it at the floor as they walked out. I closed the door behind them and leaned against it, legs weak. Kendra came down, wordless. Just held me. Later that night, I checked the camera feed from the front porch. They were still out there, arguing in the driveway. Hank yelling. My mom sobbing. Brandon staring at our house like it had stolen something from him. They drove off. I haven't seen or heard from them since. And I don't expect to. Because that chapter? It's done. Life didn't suddenly become a movie montage after that dinner. It just kept moving, one quiet, beautiful moment at a time. Kendra and I settled back into our rhythm, now with this strange new weight finally off my chest, like I had dropped something I'd carried for far too long without realizing how much it was dragging me down. Our house on the edge of town wasn't much by some people's standards, just a modest 4-bedroom with scuffed walls, toys scattered across the living room floor, and a kitchen that always smelled like something slightly overcooked, but to me it felt like a palace. Ellie was 7 by then, asking questions about the moon and demanding bedtime stories with dramatic voices, and Marcus, 4, had decided he was going to be a firefighter-dinosaur hybrid when he grew up. Kendra worked 3 days a week at the clinic, not because she had to, but because she wanted to, and I'd finally stepped away from the line at Sunny's, only jumping in when someone called out or when the new hires couldn't get the crust right on Geraldine's apple pie, which she still critiqued with that same sharp tongue even after retiring. Sunny's had grown to 3 locations, not a franchise or anything flashy, just 3 honest, welcoming places where people came for good food and stayed for the warmth, and where I no longer had to prove myself every day to feel like I belonged. My favorite part of the day was early morning before anyone else was awake, when I'd stand in the kitchen holding a mug of too hot coffee, watching the sunrise stretch over the backyard, thinking about how all of this ordinary, chaotic, beautiful life, was something I built. I thought about Grandma Rose a lot during those mornings. She was the only person in my old life who ever saw me, really saw me. She'd slip me $20 bills with a wink and whisper, "Save this for your escape," and I used to think she meant college or maybe a car, but now I realize she meant this: freedom, peace, something that was mine. When she passed, I didn't go to the funeral. I sent flowers anonymously and watched from afar as my mom posted heart emojis and dramatic tributes online, pretending we'd all been one big happy family. I don't regret not going. Dead people don't care if you show up. Funerals are for the living, and I needed to protect the life I'd fought to create. I used to think closure meant someone apologizing, owning what they did, but it turns out closure is just a decision you make when you finally understand that the people who hurt you don't get to decide who you become. I didn't go back. I didn't reach out. I didn't seek approval. Because I had something better. A real home. A real family. And for the first time, when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the kid who got left behind. I saw a man who kept walking forward. 15 years after I was left at that rest stop in Colorado, I got a LinkedIn notification that stopped me cold. My profile had been viewed 27 times in a single day, and when I checked who it was, there he was, Brandon. After all that time, the past had finally crawled out from where I buried it and tapped on my shoulder like it never left, and suddenly I wasn't the man with a mortgage and 2 kids. I was 22 again, staring down an empty parking lot, waiting for a family that never came back. I didn't say anything to Kendra right away, but it stayed with me, lingering behind every normal moment like a shadow, until 3 days later, I was back at Sunny's East dealing with the supplier screw-up when Maya called from the front, saying a family was asking for me, and I walked out expecting to see Kendra's parents, only it was them. Hank looked older, smaller somehow, the weight of his own choices dragging down the man who used to tower over me. Linda's face was drawn and tired beneath badly dyed hair, and Brandon stood there like he still thought he owned the room, but his eyes betrayed something else. Desperation. There was a young woman too, quiet and unsure, who turned out to be his wife. I should have walked away, should have told Maya to send them packing, but I didn't. I invited them to sit, asked Maya to bring water, and listened as they fumbled through small talk, dropping my name like they had any right to it, telling stories that painted their abandonment as a misunderstanding, a regrettable accident. Something they could spin away with just enough tears and nostalgia. And then came the pitch: Hank's medical bills, Linda's knee surgery, Brandon's failed business and debt, and just like that, the illusion cracked. They weren't there for reconciliation, they were there for money. $220,000 to be exact. I let them finish. Then I walked into my office, came back with an envelope and handed it to Hank. Inside was a check for $73.50, the exact cost of a Greyhound bus ticket from Grand Junction to our hometown the year they left me stranded. That's what it would have taken to come back then. He stared at it, confused, and I told him exactly what it was, watched the silence stretch between us before he finally erupted, shouting about ungratefulness, about loyalty, about family, playing the same broken record I grew up with. I didn't argue. I didn't flinch. I opened the door and told them it was time to go. Linda cried. Brandon's mask slipped, revealing the same bitterness I remembered. His wife looked ashamed for all of them. When the door shut behind them, I locked it, leaned against it, and took a long breath that felt like it reached down into my bones. That night, I watched them on the security feed, standing in the driveway arguing, and I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel hurt. I felt nothing. And that was the most freeing thing of all. They were ghosts now. Shadows. Footnotes in a story that no longer belonged to them. I crawled into bed beside Kendra, kissed her shoulder, and stared up at the ceiling thinking about everything we had built: two wild, beautiful kids, a life stitched together from quiet mornings, burnt toast, bedtime stories, and inside jokes. They could never touch that. The best revenge wasn't a confrontation or a dramatic exit, it was waking up every day to a life I created with my own two hands, a life they said I was too weak to build, and knowing I never needed them to be whole. I didn't go back. I never will. Because I didn't just survive being abandoned, I became someone they couldn't destroy.